The air was thick with humidity, a tangible presence that clung to every leaf and stone in the lush expanse of the Silver Creek Wildlife Reserve. The distant murmur of cicadas filled the late afternoon haze, blending with the chatter of birds darting between the dense canopies. Yet, amidst the vibrant symphony of life, an unsettling silence descended near the gorilla enclosure. It was the kind of stillness that pricked the skin, a foreboding calm before chaos. A shrill scream shattered the peace. Visitors froze mid-step, their eyes drawn to the towering rock barrier of the gorilla habitat. A child's cry rang out, sharp and desperate, from the pit below. Panic swept through the crowd as parents clutched their children closer, their breaths catching in collective horror. In the enclosure, a 5-year-old boy, his small frame dwarfed by the towering rocks around him, sat motionless in the dirt. His bright red shirt stood out like a beacon against the muted greens and browns of the habitat. His tear-streaked face twisted in confusion and fear as he clutched a stuffed toy, a well-loved giraffe, against his chest. The boy had been standing on the viewing platform moments earlier, peering over the edge with wide-eyed curiosity. A sudden misstep, the loss of balance and gravity had claimed him in an instant. The crowd could only watch helplessly as he tumbled into the enclosure. "Call for help," a woman's voice screamed from the throng, her words echoing as zookeepers scrambled into action. Yet the boy's predicament had already drawn the attention of the enclosure's largest inhabitant. Emerging from the shadows of the bamboo thicket was Harambe, a silverback gorilla. His massive frame moved with a deliberate grace, the rippling muscles beneath his glossy black fur exuding power with every step. He was the undisputed leader of his troop, a gentle but firm patriarch who commanded both fear and respect. Harambe's deep-set eyes locked onto the boy, who sat frozen in the center of the enclosure. The gorilla's expression was inscrutable, a mix of curiosity, caution, and something else entirely. The boy whimpered, his tiny voice carrying over the hushed crowd. Every instinct screamed for the boy to run, but fear rooted him to the spot. The silverback closed the distance between them in slow, deliberate strides. The crowd collectively held their breath. "He's going to hurt him," someone cried, their voice tinged with dread. Parents shielded their children's eyes, unwilling to let them witness the tragedy unfolding. But Harambe didn't attack. Instead, he crouched low, his immense hands resting on the ground as he studied the boy. The two locked eyes, one pair wide with fear, the other deep and unreadable. Time seemed to stretch, the moment hanging precariously on a knife's edge. Then, Harambe reached out, his enormous fingers brushing the dirt just inches from the boy. A low rumble escaped his chest, a sound that vibrated through the air like distant thunder. The boy flinched but didn't move away. In the hushed silence, a heartbeat later, the gorilla's action stunned everyone. Harambe gently scooped the boy closer, shielding him with his massive body as though sensing the vulnerability in the tiny human before him. The crowd erupted in gasps and cries of disbelief. Zookeepers shouted into their radios, desperate for guidance. And above it all, a single question hung in the air, unspoken yet shared by everyone watching. What would happen next? Timmy Reynolds was no stranger to curiosity. At just 5 years old, his world was a kaleidoscope of wonder. Every flower, every butterfly, and every bump in the sidewalk held a story waiting to be unraveled. But beneath his adventurous spirit lay a quieter truth. Timmy had been through more in his few years than most children his age. Born prematurely, he had fought for every breath during his first days in the neonatal intensive care unit. His parents, Laura and Jason, had been told to prepare for the worst, but Timmy defied the odds, his tiny fists clenching at life with unwavering determination. That tenacity carried him through his early years, though the scars of those battles left his parents overly protective. Timmy's curiosity often clashed with their caution. "Stay close, Timmy," Laura would plead whenever they ventured out. "I don't want you getting hurt." But her words often fell on eager, wandering ears. At the wildlife reserve that day, Timmy's fascination with the gorillas had drawn him away, his tiny hands gripping the railing as he leaned over to watch the primates below. It had been a fleeting moment, a distracted parent, a loose grip on the rail, and suddenly, Timmy was gone, tumbling into the enclosure. Harambe's story was one of resilience and leadership. Born in the lush forests of Congo, his early life had been marked by upheaval. His troop had been decimated by poachers, their tranquil world shattered by the harsh realities of human greed. As a young silverback, Harambe had been captured and taken to a rehabilitation center, where he witnessed the fragility of his kind. Through the years, Harambe grew into a magnificent specimen, his strength and intelligence unmatched. Transferred to the Silver Creek Wildlife Reserve as part of a breeding program, he quickly assumed the role of leader within his troop. Harambe was not merely a dominant force, he was a protector, a father figure to the younger gorillas, and a calming presence to the females. The reserve staff often marveled at Harambe's intelligence. They spoke of the way he observed visitors with quiet curiosity, as though trying to understand the strange creatures on the other side of the glass. But Harambe's trust in humans was tenuous at best, shaped by the trauma of his past. He carried the weight of his troop's safety on his broad shoulders, and his instincts to protect had been honed through years of survival. Laura and Jason were young parents, their lives a careful balancing act between work, family, and the challenges of raising a spirited child. Laura, a nurse, had spent countless sleepless nights by Timmy's bedside during his early struggles. She often joked that her son had inherited her stubbornness, though deep down, she admired his resilience. Jason, a wildlife photographer, shared Timmy's love of nature. He had always dreamed of showing his son the wonders of the animal kingdom, capturing moments of connection between humans and wildlife through his lens. Yet, guilt gnawed at him, his demanding job often kept him away from home, leaving Laura to shoulder much of the parenting burden. Their visit to the wildlife reserve was meant to be a family bonding day, a chance to reconnect. But as they watched Timmy fall, their shared guilt and fears converged into a singular, heart-stopping moment. The fall had brought these two stories together, the innocent curiosity of a child and the protective instincts of a silverback gorilla. On opposite sides of a vast chasm of experience and understanding, Timmy and Harambe now faced each other in the enclosure. For Harambe, this small creature was not a threat. He saw no malice in Timmy's wide, tearful eyes, only vulnerability. Perhaps Harambe recognized something familiar in the boy, a reflection of his own fragility from years past, when he too had been a young, helpless creature in a dangerous world. For Timmy, the gorilla was both terrifying and fascinating. Harambe's size and power were undeniable, yet there was something gentle in his movements, a strange calmness that contrasted with the chaos erupting outside the enclosure. It was a moment suspended in time, a boy and a beast, each carrying scars of survival, each navigating a world they couldn't fully understand. And as the crowd above them held its breath, their encounter began to unfold. The air within the enclosure felt different, as if the usual rhythms of life had paused for this singular moment. Harambe crouched, his immense form towering over Timmy like a living fortress. The boy remained frozen, his small body trembling against the ground. His stuffed giraffe lay limp beside him, its vibrant yellow fur smeared with dirt. Above them, chaos reigned. The panicked voices of zookeepers echoed through the air as they shouted orders into radios. "Tranquilizer on standby," one of them barked. "Clear the perimeter." But nothing seemed fast enough. Every second felt like an eternity. "Harambe, come back," a female gorilla from the troop barked softly, hooting with concern from a nearby ledge. The younger gorillas huddled together, unsure of the sudden tension that gripped their leader. Harambe ignored them, his focus entirely on the fragile figure before him. Timmy's wide eyes filled with tears, but his voice remained a trembling whisper. "Mommy," he called out, the single word lost amidst the distant shouting. The silverback extended one massive hand, its fingers curling slightly as it hovered near the boy. Harambe's eyes, deep and soulful, seemed to study Timmy not as an intruder but as a puzzle. What was this tiny, frightened creature doing in his domain? Was it friend, foe, or something else? Timmy flinched at the movement, his instinct screaming to flee. But something in Harambe's calm demeanor stopped him. The gorilla's hand didn't strike or grab, it rested on the ground, palm up, an almost deliberate gesture of non-aggression. The boy's gaze flickered between the gorilla's face and the enormous hand. Tentatively, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the rough, calloused surface of Harambe's palm. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. "It's okay," Timmy murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring himself or the creature before him. A low rumble emanated from Harambe's chest, not a growl, but a deep, resonant sound that carried across the enclosure. It was a noise of comfort, the kind a silverback used to calm its troop. The crowd above seemed to hold its collective breath, their terror now mingled with a strange, reluctant awe. As the interaction unfolded, the zookeepers made their move. One of them, a man named Charlie, who had worked with Harambe for years, approached the enclosure with careful steps. "We need to get the boy out now," he said into his radio, his voice steady despite the tension. "No sudden movements," another zookeeper replied. "We don't want to startle him." Inside the enclosure, the situation was becoming increasingly precarious. Timmy, emboldened by Harambe's lack of aggression, attempted to stand. His little legs wobbled beneath him, and he stumbled forward, landing against the gorilla's arm. Harambe didn't react with anger or alarm. Instead, he shifted his position slightly, blocking the boy from the edge of the moat that bordered the enclosure. It was as though he understood the danger better than anyone else. Above, Laura's cries grew more frantic. "Please, someone save my son," she screamed, her voice breaking with desperation. Jason clutched her arm, his own face pale, his mind racing. A man in the crowd muttered, "Why isn't the gorilla attacking? That's a wild animal, this doesn't make sense." But for those who knew gorillas, Harambe's actions weren't entirely surprising. Silverbacks were protectors by nature, their dominance tempered by an innate sense of responsibility for their troop. Yet this wasn't his troop. It was a human child, a stranger in every sense. The spell was broken when Timmy tripped again, this time falling into the shallow water of the moat. The splash startled Harambe, who rose to his full height, a towering figure of raw power. He glanced toward the crowd, then back at Timmy. His body tensed, his posture defensive, as if he feared a threat would come from the voices above. "Harambe, easy," Charlie called softly from the edge of the enclosure. "It's okay, big guy. Just step back." But Harambe didn't step back. Instead, he moved closer to Timmy, who sat shivering in the shallow water. The gorilla reached down, lifting the boy with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature. The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps and screams, some yelling for action, others stunned into silence. In Harambe's grasp, Timmy looked impossibly small, like a fragile doll, cradled in massive hands. Harambe carried Timmy to a patch of soft grass away from the water, setting him down as carefully as a parent tucking in their child. But his protective stance remained firm. He stood over the boy, his gaze darting between the human intruders and the trees surrounding the enclosure, as though daring anyone, or anything, to come closer. Above, zookeepers scrambled to finalize a plan. "We're out of time," Charlie said. "If we don't act soon, it's going to escalate." And yet, inside the enclosure, another truth was unfolding. Harambe wasn't a threat. He was a guardian, a bridge between two worlds, forged by an encounter that neither he nor the boy could fully understand. But how long could this fragile moment last? The tension in the air promised that something, anything, could shatter it at any second. The enclosure seemed to pulsate with raw energy, the line between fear and fascination blurred in the minds of everyone watching. Harambe's massive frame loomed protectively over Timmy, his every movement calculated yet deliberate. The boy, though still trembling, appeared less afraid, his tiny fingers gripping the gorilla's fur for balance. From the edge of the habitat, Charlie, the lead zookeeper, spoke softly into the radio. "The tranquilizer is ready, but it's risky. If Harambe feels threatened or startled, it could end badly for the child." "We can't wait much longer," came the reply. "Any sudden move could change everything." Harambe shifted slightly, positioning himself so his body was between Timmy and the outer edges of the enclosure. His deep-set eyes scanned the crowd above, filled with emotions that no one could definitively interpret. Was it caution? Confusion? Or something deeper, an understanding of the fragile life in his care? Timmy's mother, Laura, sobbed uncontrollably, her body shaking as Jason held her tightly. "He's protecting him," Jason whispered, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. But Laura shook her head. "He's still a wild animal. We don't know what he'll do." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Harambe tensed, letting out a low rumble. Timmy, sensing the shift in the gorilla's mood, reached out and patted Harambe's arm with his small hand. "It's okay," the boy said in a voice so soft that only the closest onlookers could hear. Harambe tilted his head slightly, the deep resonance of his vocalization quieting. The boy's innocence seemed to cut through the tension like a knife, disarming the massive creature in a way no human could. But danger was closer than anyone realized. A rustling sound came from the bamboo thicket at the far end of the enclosure. One of the younger gorillas, spooked by the commotion, darted out of hiding, shrieking in alarm. The sudden movement startled Timmy, who stumbled backward, landing perilously close to the shallow moat. The crowd screamed, and Laura's wail pierced the air. "Timmy!" Harambe reacted instantly, turning and scooping Timmy up in one powerful arm. He held the boy aloft, his posture no longer calm but fiercely protective. The silverback let out a deep bellow, a sound that reverberated through the enclosure and silenced every voice above. For the first time, true danger seemed imminent. The gorilla was no longer just a guardian, he was on high alert, his instincts flaring to defend the small life he now saw as his responsibility. Charlie stepped closer to the edge of the enclosure, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Harambe, it's okay. Easy, big guy. No one's going to hurt you." Harambe turned his head toward the zookeeper, his eyes narrowing in wary recognition. He had seen Charlie countless times before, offering food, guiding the troop, maintaining a delicate balance between trust and distance. But this moment was different. The gorilla looked down at Timmy, who clung to his massive arm, his tear-streaked face buried against Harambe's fur. Slowly, Harambe lowered himself to a seated position, cradling the boy like a precious treasure. His bellowing ceased, replaced by the soft rumble of reassurance. The crowd above, spellbound, watched as Timmy raised his head. His voice, still shaky, cut through the heavy silence. "Don't be scared," he whispered, as if comforting the enormous creature holding him. Harambe's breathing slowed, his gaze softening. He gently placed Timmy back on the grass, nudging the boy toward the edge of the enclosure where the zookeepers waited. But even as he released the child, Harambe stayed close, his body tense, ready to intervene if danger arose again. Charlie seized the moment. "Timmy, come to me," he said, his voice steady but urgent. The boy hesitated, glancing back at Harambe, who gave a low grunt, almost as if encouraging him. Then, with small, shaky steps, Timmy walked toward the waiting arms of the zookeeper. The crowd erupted in cheers and relieved sobs as Charlie hoisted Timmy out of the enclosure and into his mother's trembling embrace. Laura clung to her son, kissing his face repeatedly, while Jason's eyes glistened with tears. But the drama was not yet over. As the humans focused on the boy's rescue, Harambe remained near the edge of the enclosure, watching intently. A loud clang echoed through the habitat as one of the zookeepers accidentally dropped a piece of equipment, startling the younger gorillas again. Harambe immediately went on high alert, his massive body standing tall as he emitted a warning roar. The crowd froze, and Charlie held his breath. But instead of retreating to the safety of the thicket, Harambe lingered by the very spot where Timmy had been rescued, standing guard as if ensuring no further harm would come to the small human he had protected. For one fleeting moment, the crowd and the gorilla seemed united in a shared understanding, a fragile, unspoken connection that transcended the barriers between species. Harambe gazed upward, his eyes meeting those of the boy one last time. Then, with a final, deliberate glance at Charlie, the silverback turned and disappeared into the bamboo, leaving behind a moment that would forever change the lives of everyone who witnessed it. The sun began to set over the Cincinnati Zoo, casting a warm, golden glow across the tranquil enclosures. The echoes of the day's chaos had faded, replaced by a profound stillness. Yet, the atmosphere felt heavier, as though the air itself carried the weight of what had transpired. Timmy sat in his mother's arms, his tiny fingers clutching the now tattered stuffed giraffe. Laura couldn't stop holding him, her tears streaking down her cheeks as she whispered, "I thought I lost you." Jason knelt beside them, his hand resting gently on Timmy's back. "You're safe now, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. But his eyes kept drifting toward the enclosure, where the towering figure of Harambe had disappeared. Inside the gorilla habitat, Harambe sat with his troop, his back turned to the viewing glass. The other gorillas approached him hesitantly, their soft hoots and grunts seeking reassurance. The silverback, normally stoic, emitted low rumbles of comfort, his massive shoulders relaxed, but his gaze distant. It was as if Harambe understood the significance of what had happened. He had protected a child not of his world, breaking the primal boundaries between man and beast. And though the humans had taken the boy back, a part of Harambe's presence lingered with Timmy, as though a thread of their shared moment still bound them. As the zookeepers worked to restore order, Charlie couldn't help but pause outside the enclosure. He watched Harambe from a distance, his expression one of awe and contemplation. He knew, Charlie murmured to himself. He knew the boy wasn't a threat. He didn't act out of instinct, he acted out of something deeper. By the next morning, news of the event had spread like wildfire. Videos captured by bystanders circulated online, showing the incredible moments when Harambe shielded Timmy, carried him with gentle care, and ultimately allowed the boy to be rescued. Headlines around the world described it as a story of heroism, compassion, and the blurred lines between humanity and nature. Social media exploded with debates and discussions. Was Harambe acting out of instinct, empathy, or some mysterious combination of both? While the debates raged, one truth remained undisputed: Harambe had done something extraordinary. Timmy, now safe at home, clutched his stuffed giraffe and pointed at the TV screen. "That's my friend," he told his parents, his voice filled with innocent certainty. "Harambe kept me safe." Laura and Jason exchanged glances, their hearts aching with gratitude and a newfound respect for the creatures they had once viewed only through the glass of an enclosure. The Cincinnati Zoo announced changes in the wake of the event, improving safety measures to ensure that no such accident could happen again. But they also used the story as an opportunity to educate the public about gorillas and their capacity for intelligence, emotion, and compassion. Harambe became a symbol, not just of this singular event but of the delicate relationship between humans and the natural world. Donations poured into the zoo, funding new conservation efforts and sanctuaries for gorillas in the wild. Years later, Timmy, now a young adult, stood at the edge of a lush gorilla sanctuary in the heart of Africa. He gazed at the majestic creatures roaming freely, his heart swelling with a deep, inexplicable connection. "I owe my life to one of you," he whispered, his voice carried by the gentle breeze. Harambe's legacy had endured, not just in the zoo or in headlines, but in the soul of the boy he had saved. Timmy had grown up with a passion for wildlife, dedicating his life to protecting the creatures who shared our planet. Harambe's story became more than a tale of survival. It became a reminder of our shared existence, the unexpected connections that bind us, and the profound compassion that can emerge in the most unlikely of circumstances. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, the world continued to turn. But somewhere, in a sanctuary or a jungle, a silverback gorilla stood tall, a guardian of his world. And somewhere else, a young man carried forward a legacy born from a moment of courage, trust, and an unspoken bond. In the end, Harambe's greatest gift wasn't just saving Timmy, it was showing humanity that even in the wildest of hearts, there exists a capacity for kindness that transcends words.